Nick Durant here with Tattoo University. Don't try to adjust your screen. I have full control. No, I have not made a mistake or messed up on the editing of this video again. Today I'm going to give you some tips that will help you better tattoo just by being able to see what you're doing. So if I start off by removing the lens cap from the camera, you're going to be able to see better. But things might still be a little bit fuzzy, so let's turn on a light. Now this isn't the ideal situation either, because now we have the light, but it's in the wrong spot. And it's actually going to prevent us from seeing things instead of helping us. Let's get some better lighting in the right spot. And now we can see what we're doing. Let's even let in some natural light here. Get some good sunlight here. Get some vitamin D in our system. So we're on the right track here. We're doing pretty good. And so let's get on to doing a tattoo stencil and outlining a tattoo stencil. Oh, what's that? My hand's in the way. You can't see the stencil because my hand's in the way. Well, there you go. That's another issue. Sometimes if you're doing a stencil incorrectly or going the wrong direction, you won't be able to see what you're doing because of your hand being in the way of what you're doing. You're making it harder to tattoo, and you're probably even rubbing off your stencil because your hand's in the wrong spot. And your lighting is in the wrong spot now too. Really serious artists pay attention to their lighting and how their lighting affects their work. Because where you have light, you have shadow. And if you're doing a really detailed drawing, even your shadow can prevent you from seeing what you're doing. Draftsmen, before computers were used exclusively now, I have a really old book about drafting and how to do it correctly. And it goes into detail about how your lighting should be set up, because when people used to draw blueprints, they actually drew blueprints and did everything by hand. Now everything's done on a computer. And it was really important when you're doing detailed blueprint drawings to see what you're doing and to make sure you were doing things correctly, because then those drawings would be taken to the field and people would build stuff from that. And they were very intricate, detailed drawings. So even the color of your wall, you can see I've painted this wall gray, will affect the lighting you have. Even the type of light bulb you have will affect how you can see. Here's another thing to consider. I am right-handed. If you are left-handed, you want to do the exact opposite of a right-hander. Because I am right-handed, you can see if my light source is on this side, on the right side of me, my shadow blocks my drawing when I'm trying to trace something. So the correct thing to do would be to move my light source from over there to over on this side of me. You see the difference that makes? Let me show you before. Okay, here's my drawing. This is what I'm trying to see. There's a shadow over it. Turn that off. Turn this on over here. And voila, I can see better. Imagine you are tattooing on somebody, and this is how it looks. Just in case you didn't realize this, tattoos are permanent. So you don't really want to make any kind of mistakes or leave something to where you can make an error. You want to be really precise. And if you're doing a really intricate drawing, you want your light to be in the correct place. So that you can see what you're doing. So here's another issue with lighting is sometimes you can have too much lighting and you actually fuzz out the picture and you can't see what you're doing because you have too much light. This is kind of the effect you get here, where you actually can't see anything. You just see the light. See how the camera automatically adjusts to this and it makes everything else darker? Your eyes adjust to the light and they're going to kind of do the same thing. So this is a headlamp. And I don't use these very much, but a lot of people I see tattooing try to use these. But the problem is, with this thing being on your head, it's going to be straight above your drawing. And we're just saying that if you're right-handed, you need the light source to your left over here instead of your right. Now this might be better. You can probably still get along like this, but just remember that. Especially if you have some lubricant on someone's skin and you get that shiny glare with the light, you just need to make sure that your light source is in the correct spot. And if the headlamp is better than not using the headlamp, then use the headlamp. It works for some people, but mostly I just have a lamp that moves and has an adjustable arm. If I need to adjust my light, I move my light where I need it, and then I tighten it down again and it holds it in place for me. Now you can see too that I am touching this lamp with my gloves on. You know you're going to be touching your lamp or moving your lamp around if you need some light during a tattoo. What you want to do is use barrier protection for your lamp also. When you touch it, you're not actually touching the lamp. You're touching the barrier protection that you're going to get rid of later. And this way you don't cross-contaminate. You don't touch your lamp and then get something on that and then touch something else and cross-contaminate it. Light source and having the correct lighting is important. But that's only one step to being able to see what you're doing while you're tattooing. Next thing you want to be aware of is your hand. Your hand being in the way and not being able to see what you're doing. Again, I'm right-handed, so when I tattoo, I go this direction. That pushes your needle into the back of the tip, so that is helpful for that, keeping your needle steady, but it's also helpful because I can see the tip of my tattoo needle, or in this case my pencil, and I can see where it's going. So if I wanted to trace this, let's say this is a tattoo stencil, and I'm going to make this permanent, and this is going to be on someone's skin for the rest of their life. If I go, direction is important, especially on a tattoo. If I go this direction and I outline this, or even if I pull down, I can still see my tip. I'm still at an angle like this, but I'm either going this direction where I can see my tip, or I'm going down. I can see the tip going down or going this direction, and I can see my stencil. So while I'm tattooing, I'm actually placing myself where I can pull lines like this. I'm either going this direction or I'm going this direction. But you can see if I go from here and I try to go this direction, I can't see what I'm doing. Can you see my stencil? You can see it here. I start working here and I go this direction, you can see everything. If I go here and I try working this direction, you can't see anything. You can't see what I'm doing. Here's the other issue. And I'm just going to keep saying this over and over again until it gets stuck in people's heads. The more you draw, the more you study art, the better your tattoos will be. People who draw with pencils or charcoal understand this point, because you have to be really careful while you're doing pencil drawings, especially charcoal, because it's even worse, not to drag your hand across your drawing, because you smear all of that lead all over the back of your hand. Just dragging your hand across this the whole time, you end up with lead all over the back of your hand, and your drawing is smeared everywhere. If you've done a really light drawing, what you do is you actually rub the drawing off. Does that sound familiar to anybody? People, you guys who keep asking me about my stencil coming off. Why is my stencil coming off? I don't understand why my stencil is coming. You're rubbing all over your stencil. You're rubbing it off. If you start over here and you actually get this tattoo in, and let's say you work on your outline here, that's tattooed. That's not going to go anywhere. So I can rub my hand all over this all I want. I don't really worry about losing my stencil anymore. And I can use the crappiest stencil solution and it will still work, because of the way I tattoo. I don't touch this, I don't lube this up before I tattoo. I start at the edge here and I start working my way in, working my way this direction. If you're left-handed, you're starting here, you're working that direction. I'm right-handed, I'm starting this way, going this way. So direction, as far as tattooing, is important, but it's not maybe as important as you're thinking. It's important so that you can see what you're doing. But I can still tattoo, and I showed this in my last video. I can tattoo going this direction. And see, I just screwed up right there. It's just not the best thing for me to do. It's better for me to tattoo this direction, because I can see what I'm doing. I can follow my stencil, and if I start over here, I'm not going to rub off my stencil before I at least get some kind of outline in, so then I can come back and add details later. We're talking about your lighting, talking about the direction. We're talking about the direction of travel here, or the direction you tattoo. And now let's talk about your equipment. So I prefer to use these clear tubes. These are just clear, they're called ghost tubes. Sometimes different companies are called something else, but you can see through the tube. Now, I haven't always used those, because I used to use these tubes like this because they were cheaper. These black tubes that you can't see through. And why did I use those? Because they were cheaper. Because money doesn't grow on trees, and these were not as expensive. But as I tattooed more, I realized that I preferred these, and I liked the fact that you can see through these. If you're tattooing and you need to clean your tip, you can see in this tip here if you have a booger in there or something jamming up your needle. You can see your needle, you can see the ink, you can see everything. That's the point. See through. But is it absolutely necessary to have a see-through tip? And the answer to that is actually no. You can tattoo just fine with these black tips. In fact, I've moved to the cartridge system here, and I've been using these. I'm going to start looking for some clear tips, but you can see these are not clear tubes. They have tips that are this milky consistency. It's not see-through, it's white. And you can use those too. That's kind of like this cartridge here. You can use those just fine. I just prefer myself, because I do everything a certain way, and I tattoo a certain way, and if I'm doing really intricate stuff, I like to see what I'm doing, and I like to see if my needles are messed up. I like to see if there's a goober in the end of my tip. It just gives me a little more peace of mind being able to see everything than I get from a tip like this. And you can see these don't have grips on them because these were cheaper. They were made cheaper. So I pulled the grips off. The grips moved around while you're tattooing. And on a better made tube and grip, this is actually made so it doesn't move around. So again, that gives me more stability while I'm tattooing. Just a little more peace of mind while I'm tattooing with this grip instead of with a cheaper grip. You can also see some people don't like to tattoo with the plastic tips. They feel like You don't get the same results that you do with a plastic tip as you do with a metal tip. And you can see, you're not going to be able to see through that, but you can use this just fine. The advantage with a clear tip is just being able to see a little bit better. Give you a little more insight into what's going on in the tip of your needle. A lot of times too, if you're mixing colors while you're tattooing, let me show you something here. Usually, why do you think we use white paper? Sometimes you can use other colors, but for the most part, people use white paper. Why do you think the palettes that painters use have a white background on them? And if you even look at these little watercolor, cheapy watercolor packets, they have white containers inside them. Because if you're mixing colors, you want to see the true color that you are mixing. And when you use white, it allows you to see your paints better and see the color that you've mixed better. So if you're using something with a color to it, it's going to be a little harder to see the true color that you have mixed in the end of your tip, unless it is clear or white. I haven't thought about that. Go out and look at all the stuff for mixing paint and palettes and things that painters use. It's all a white background. So I want to explain a little bit more about the middle finger method, because I think a lot of people kind of misunderstand and they go off saying that, this is not a good method, you shouldn't be doing this, yada yada. Pretty much people just look for a reason to bitch about anything. So we're talking about seeing how you tattoo. And I talk a lot about using the middle finger method here. And I think a lot of people aren't understanding the concept, and they don't understand or they don't see what I'm saying to do. And I'm going to use my Dr. Fresh machine to show you that even with a nasty guitar string needle, my finger is totally safe. It's not going to go anywhere near this needle here. And while I'm tattooing, this will actually help me tattoo. Here's the tip of your needle. My finger does not go anywhere near the front of this needle. My finger doesn't go next to the needle. It doesn't sit side by side to the needle itself. My finger actually sits back here on the tip, but not the tip, not the very end of the tip, back here, away from the needle. You can see on your tip here where you get this bevel, where it starts to go down. Here's your ink cup, your tip. Your finger is here by the bevel, nowhere near the tip of the needle, nowhere near the needle. So when I'm tattooing right-handed going this direction, the finger sits on the client's skin right here. And you can see these fingers tucked in here. People talk about a bridge where you just have your fingers like this. You're creating a bridge. So here's the bridge without the middle finger. And you can also take your other hand and kind of support this hand. Actually hold this hand so that your hand doesn't get tired and you can do really intricate work. Because if you're like this, and this is a lot of the newbies' problems, is you got a lot of wiggle room. There's no support here. You're just drawing. You're gonna get a bunch of bad lines. Your lines need to be even depth. Rest your hand on this hand, rest your fingers on there, boom, support. Even, nice, even tattoo with support. Now, I'm just taking that a step further. Middle finger on the bevel of the tip, so that the finger, especially if you're working at 45, is on the skin. Now, let's turn this on. Okay, see the needle. Let's see if I can. Alright. Trying to get it so you can see. Okay, there you go. See the needle coming out. Fingers nowhere near the needle. The needle, I use a little hang when I tattoo. So I start off with my needle not that far out, but I can tattoo like that. So look at my finger there. Is that anywhere near the tip of the needle where it's going to get poked? So we tattoo, needles running in and out, bridge on the person. I can even use a little support here. And then my fingers, see my fingers and my pinky fingers supporting all of this, making this bridge. And the middle finger is just like the end of the bridge. Like here's your support, the base. Let's say if you're going over a water bridge. Here's where you start, you drive over. All this is over water, and then here's the other support holding the other side of the bridge. And so this finger doesn't move at all. It just stays there. My hand stays like this the whole time I tattoo. And it's my wrist that moves. See how I stay at the same position? This is how I tattoo. That's how far. See how the needle is over there and my finger is not moving. So if you want to see what you're doing while you're like tattooing, I'm gonna leave the light off so you can see the needle a little bit better. You just follow the outline with the needle. Look at the end of the needle here. Alright, watch the end of the needle here. And look at my stencil. Once I can get it back on camera here. Okay. I'm watching the end of the needle. And I follow this line. Watching the end of the needle, follow this line. And in this manner, I do my stencil. You can even, this is what some people do too. You can tuck this finger in here, but see it's still kind of supporting it. See how this part of my finger is supporting the tip here? You can do it this way too, if that makes you feel better. You know, you can still support this finger here, but put the tip on your knuckle there. If that makes you feel better, get your finger a little further away from the needle there. And you want to be able to see what you're doing, because what you're going to do is just, while you're tattooing, you're going to run your machine, you're going to follow this line. You're going to run your machine, and you just pointing your tip of the needle at your stencil and going in the skin. When you're doing this technique, and I'm going this direction here, you can see some of you are sticking your finger in the tattoo, in the ink while you're tattooing. my finger is actually back here, and you're kind of tattooing off to the side. You're not tattooing right where your finger's at. You're off this direction over here. See? So you're not running your finger right through the ink. You're off to the side a little bit and running that line. The ink's right there. You dab, get rid of the ink, and then you run another line. So you're not putting your finger right behind the needle here, running it through all the ink. It's off to the side. And this also helps you see what you're doing. It keeps your line work nice because you're nice and steady. You're not going up and down. You're staying right there, running lines. Here's another phenomenon. If you don't stretch while you're tattooing, see if I can kind of recreate this, your lines will actually vibrate, and you can kind of see what you're doing, but this is how I know I'm not stretching good enough, because my lines will move around and I won't be able to follow my line work because everything's vibrating too much. See if I can recreate this a little bit. Okay, so this is what happens. If you stretch, your lines don't move around. The skin isn't moving around. But if you don't stretch, you actually get this bouncy effect. And it makes it more difficult to follow your stencil. See how that makes it difficult to see what you're doing? So stretching is also important when it comes to seeing what you're doing while you are tattooing.